All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Schools, and I'm bringing y'all part 2 of the Washington Commanders versus Carolina Panthers preseason week 1 Pro Football Focus grades and advanced stats. Again, I'm going to do this every week, including the regular season. We do offense one day, and then we do defense and special teams the next. And as far as defense goes, we're going to take a look at overall grades, who had the highest, who had the lowest, and why, and things like that. And then we're also going to break up into different categories: run defense, pass rush, and coverage. And then even when we get to coverage, we're going to do like individual breakdowns of like a specific guy versus what receivers he covered and how the receivers' grades looked while being covered by that specific DB. So it's a full breakdown. We're going to take a look at again a lot of interesting stats as well on top of the grades. And of course, I'm just presenting this information to y'all, so I'm not necessarily here to agree or disagree with Pro Football Focus, because then we'll be here for like 2 hours. I'm more so here to show y'all how Pro Football Focus feels about our guys in certain situations and in certain ways. But also, you got to remember, this is preseason, so a lot of guys are playing in the game. The guys who are pretty much going to be playing all the time and are going to be starters barely even plays in these preseason games, especially against this Panthers, where our starters really only played one quarter. So these grades are going to be a little weird, and of course a lot of the statistics are going to be weird with only 1 quarter sample size, which also affects the grades. But let's go ahead and get to it, man. Before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Friday at 7 p.m. including tonight. Podcast talk about everything that's going on: funny, music, anime, gaming, sports, whatever. And then also make sure you pull up every Sunday for the call-in show, where y'all call in. I open up the phone lines and y'all voice y'all opinions, whether it be positive or negative, about the Commanders. And you can also call in and ask questions if you have them. So make sure y'all pull up to the Sunday stream every Sunday at 6 p.m. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, again, so we're doing the defense today, and Steven Parker was our highest graded player, which I'm not really surprised about, because you could definitely say he made the most plays. Now, granted, he's so far back on the depth chart, and he's definitely fighting for a roster spot. Maybe he's this year's Torrey McTyer. Now, granted, Torrey McTyer was a corner and Steven Parker's a strong safety, but I mean, it's that type of come out of nowhere ascension. Like, this guy's making plays. You got to find a way to keep him on the team, because with the showcase he's put on so far in preseason, and we'll see what he does against the Chiefs and against the Ravens next week, some other team is probably going to pick him up if we try to just put him on the practice squad and throw him away. I mean, he's definitely fighting for another roster spot, and when it comes to the end of the depth chart like that, you're fighting against other position groups. Granted, he is a strong safety, but he's fighting against the last tight end, the last running back, the last receiver, the last offensive lineman. He's fighting to prove that, okay, we need to keep another safety spot for me rather than keeping another spot open for another position group. And again, I'm not surprised by him having the highest overall grade. He was balling. Go back and look at the tape, man. That man was everywhere. He literally looked like Lewis Cine. And granted, that's me comparing him to a Georgia Bulldog, but play style wise, of course, I'm not saying he is Lewis Cine, but again, play style wise, and the things that he was doing, it literally looked like what Lewis Cine was doing for my Georgia Bulldogs defense, just making plays, whether it be coverage, run game, just kind of everywhere, always around the ball type of guy. And granted, he was going against the backups of the backups. He was out there with the third stringers, but he was even out there making plays at one point, from what I remember, some second stringers as well. And when you shine against those guys consistently as much as he did, he deserves some reps with the ones to at least see what he can do. Now, also, Myler Eifler had the second highest grade, which is really interesting, but it's mostly because of his coverage as well, just like Steven Parker. Then Jonathan Allen, out of our starters, had the highest grade with an 84.5, mostly because of his pass rush, but he was straight against run defense. I'm kind of surprised by that grade being that low, though. Got to go back and look at the film to see whether I agree or disagree. Then Bobby McCain, our starting free safety, had the 4th highest grade overall, but our 2nd highest grade out of our starters, with a 79.2 coverage grade and a 75.2 tackling grade, one of the higher tackling grades out of our entire team from that game, especially out of the starters. And then you got Cole Holcomb right behind him, 81.1 overall, 5th overall, 3rd out of the starters. And I keep emphasizing the starters because, again, Steven Parker and Milo Eifler, even though they did ball out, they balled out against backups. Cole Holcomb, Bobby McCain, and Jonathan Allen were starters against starters, so that's a little bit more significant. And Cole Holcomb's bread and butter, run defense, of course, tackling as well, but he's improved in coverage, and it shows right there. Not great, but hey, way better than anything we got from David Mayo, which we're going to look at when we get to the bottom of the list, of course. Then you have Dejon Harris right behind him, William Bradley King 7th, Montez Sweat 8th, Christian Holmes 9th, Trey Walker 10th, which I can kind of believe. They're saying that his tackling was abysmal, but like everything else, I saw him out there making plays. Pass rush, everything making plays. Then Deron Payne, along with other starters, Channing Striblin, Jacob Panajawik, Josh Drayden. I've been hearing that he's been shining more than even Danny Johnson has throughout training camp so far, so I'm not surprised. David Bada popped on screen for sure. I liked a lot of what I saw from him. Jeremy Reeves apparently was really good at tackling, pass rushing, and run defense. Coverage is what brought his grade down. Farrod Gardner, a guy from Atlanta that I'm rooting for to make the team. I don't really remember noticing him pop much on screen. I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape to really evaluate that. Then you got Corn Elder, DeJuan Neal, and Derek Forrest is pretty significant because he's a guy that's going to potentially play quite a bit, even like in regular season games out there with the starters as part of a rotation. He's probably our leading candidate for Buffalo nickel right now, so we need him to go out there and perform well. And then you also had Shaka Toney, Khaleke Hudson, and Jamin Davis down here, tackling really good, run defense almost just as good. What's bringing him down is his pass rush and his coverage, which I'm kind of surprised about because with his play style, with his athleticism, you would think he'd be better at coverage and then against the run. But like I said already in several videos, that man Jamin Davis was balling against the run. He made some really good plays that he's not necessarily going to get credit for statistically, but he blew up the run play and somebody else will make the tackle. So I'm not surprised by his run defense grade being pretty high. I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape to see what he did against coverage for it to be that low. But hey, we're focused on his run defense because his coverage is going to handle itself with his athleticism once he's learning the position better. And William Jackson III, I'm surprised by this grade because really the only play I remember him being targeted on was that one where Bobby McCain came and helped over the top where Baker Mayfield tried to throw a deep bomb. So I thought that was a pretty good play, but again, it's a lot of tape I got to go back and watch. And Percy Butler had really bad grades pretty much everywhere but coverage, and I thought he was really good in coverage from what I saw, but they felt like it was only worthy of 63.1. And of course, David Mayo, man, you're gonna have the run stopping, you're gonna have the tackling, but you're gonna have some of the worst coverage on the team. Does he have the lowest coverage grade? Nope, the only one lower than him is Devontae Bowsby, who got cut, so I guess that explains why. And I felt like Daniel Wise popped a lot too in that game, but that's because his pass rush was really good and they felt like his run defense was terrible. And then Cameron Curl, I'm very surprised to see him down here. Also for Darian Mathis, I thought he looked really good, especially against the run, but apparently they felt like he wasn't. And then focusing on run defense specifically, your top guys are Cole Holcomb, Dejon Harris, David Mayo, of course. That's pretty much all he brings to the team. William Bradley King, Jeremy Reeves. I mean, if you think about it, like 20 years ago, David Mayo would have actually been a pretty good linebacker. But right now in a passing league, he's such a liability. Then Milo Eifler, DeJuan Neal, Steven Parker, man, he excelled in a lot of different categories. And I think his run defense grade is probably the lowest out of all of his grades. And the fact that it's still this high is really noticeable. Jamin Davis, again, this is very encouraging. Not great, but it's very encouraging. Definitely progressing in the right direction. Then Nathan Gary, who we just signed, who we also have playing tight end because we just have no tight ends available in training camp right now. We're literally down to just 2 like I've talked about in previous videos, but his run defense was pretty good, which I'm encouraged by that as well, because if anything, we brought him here to cover and rush the passer, and he looked pretty good rushing the passer. He looked like he was always around the quarterback and around the ball in coverage. And then his run defense grade to be this high, that's really encouraging as well. Just like Jamin Davis, this is probably their biggest weaknesses, so for them to go out there and perform this well in those categories is very encouraging for our linebacker group. And then of course you have Jacob Panajawik, Deron Payne, Trey Walker, Derek Forrest, Cameron Curl, Farrod Gardner, and I mean, of course, a lot of other guys. I can show this on the screen so y'all can see run defense grade wise. Our worst run defenders, just to scroll down real quick: Daniel Wise and then Justin Hamilton right behind him, Percy Butler, and James Smith-Williams. Again, I'm kind of surprised by these things, because especially for Darian Mathis, I thought he looked really good against the run. But hey, man, that Pro Football Focus felt that way. I'm gonna have to go back and look at the tape to see why. And that's usually what I use these grades for, man, to be like, okay, they felt this way. Let me go back and look at the tape and see why I felt different, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're wrong. Again, none of these grades are absolute. They're mostly opinion. They're just analysis. They're not advanced statistics. So it's just like, what can you really do? Use it as a reference, but don't let it be the end all be all. And then missed tackle percentage. This is probably why their run defense grades were so bad. Percy Butler had a 1% missed tackle percentage, even though I saw him clearly make that tackle on that guy that David Mayo let go over top of him. And then Boomy Routinemi, same thing with 100% missed tackle percentage. But I think Pro Football Focus is also in preseason form, because the fact that there's just a bunch of zeros, then 100% and incompletes and nothing in between, I think this data may be a little bit wrong. I don't think they just have all the data they needed to do that. I don't know. But run stopping percentage, you have Tyler Clark with the highest with a 50. And then you have Trey Walker with a 40, Cole Holcomb with a 28.6, and Derek Forrest with a 25. So that's pretty interesting. I mean, they all pretty much have about the same. This is why preseason and guys barely playing much, and it's being a heavy rotation of first, second, third, and fourth stringers, while the sample size is just too small, because 2 stops for Tyler Clark is 50%, but the same 2 stops for Cole Holcomb is 28.6%. It's just like, we can't really use this data right now. I'm still going to present it to y'all throughout the preseason as like a warm-up for me getting even used to doing it, but like when we get to the regular season, these stats are actually going to mean something, especially these advanced stats. And then pass rush wise, Jonathan Allen was apparently our best one. Then Daniel Wise is right behind him. Jeremy Reeves with that blitz, that was a really good blitz. William Bradley King, Montez Sweat, David Bada, Trey Walker. Again, he was kind of everywhere. Even though it wasn't that high of a grade, he's still 7th out of the entire team. Deron Payne 8th, James Smith-Williams 9th, Milo Eifert 10th, tied with Bobby McCain also for 10th. And then none of these grades are really that high. Like after David Bada, it gets a little ugly anyway, so it's really no use to taking a look at all of that. But we could take a look at some interesting statistics, like who had sacks. So David Bada, Jacob Ponajawik, Jeremy Reeves, and Daniel Wise all had sacks. Who had hits? We had Trey Walker, Daniel Wise, Deron Payne, William Bradley King, Shaka Toney, and Montez Sweat. Again, it's the preseason. Pro Football Focus is also in preseason form, so I don't know how much to believe in these stats, but apparently that's how it went. And then hurries, Jonathan Allen had 3, led the team. Nathan Geary with 2. Again, he was all over the place. David Bada, Daniel Wise, Casey Toohill, Farrod Gardner, and Montez Sweat each had 1. And then win rate is interesting. Farrod Gardner won 50% of his pass rush snaps, but he still only had a 56.3 grade, so that's really weird. Then Jonathan Allen won 33.3% of his. Daniel Wise won 22.2 of his. Montez Sweat won 20. David Bada won 16.7, and everybody else is 11 and below. And the only bat down was credited to William Bradley King, which is also interesting. And then again, that's all we can really take from that. I mean, granted, again, it's preseason, so I don't even exactly know how accurate these stats are, but I trust them more when it comes to the regular season. So we'll dive into this further when we get to the regular season version of these videos. And then coverage grades, really interesting. Again, we're going to take a look at specific coverages next, because it gets really interesting. I'm just giving y'all a preview so you can see what we about to deal with. Danny Johnson versus specific receivers, all of that is really fun. But coverage wise, again, Steven Parker balled out everywhere, looked like literally like a Lewis Cine clone out there in that preseason game. Again, against backups, but it looked really good, and it looked like he made a strong case to make this team as one of the last guys that just barely slips in. Milo Eifler 2nd, Bob McCain 3rd. That's very encouraging. Again, you mostly got to take from the starters when it comes to the grades what we really can take away from it. Because granted, Steven Parker, I'm really excited about. I love the fact that he balled, but I don't really expect to even see him on Sundays unless he just somehow emerges as this really good gem out of the preseason. It's highly unlikely though. So you really got to take a look at what the starters were doing. And Bobby McCain with a 79.2, that's very encouraging. Again, the second half of last year, he definitely improved, and everybody's talking about how the communication is better, so I'm not surprised that he looks better in coverage now. He's out there ever since Cameron Curl has been his running mate at strong safety rather than Landon Collins back there in deep coverage. Bobby McCain has looked way better. The communication has been way better, all of that. And so I think it's really interesting that they felt like Bobby McCain was a far superior player to Cameron Curl in that preseason game, because you don't even see Cameron Curl on the screen currently right now. But also very encouraging as far as guys that, even if they're not starters, they're at least close to maybe playing some snaps in the regular season if we're just like an injury away type of thing. You got Cole Holcomb in coverage vastly improved from his rookie season. And we've seen it in the regular season the past couple of years, how much better he's been in coverage, getting interceptions and everything. And then Percy Butler, I think he's going to contribute more than people probably think. And so that grade is lower than what I thought I saw. I thought he was excellent in coverage, literally taking guys away. He should have had that interception to slip through his hands, but that was still a great play to even be there because the quarterback didn't even see him. Remember, Percy Butler and William Jackson are the fastest guys we have in our secondary. So for Percy Butler to become better and develop mentally is going to be dangerous for the rest of the league, because if you can honestly put just Cameron Curl's brain into Percy Butler's body, you have like literally a top 5 safety in the NFL. Cameron Curl is so elite because he's one of the smartest guys on the field, but he's not very athletic. He's not the quickest. He's not very fast. He's gained a lot of muscle, so he's definitely gotten stronger, which is going to help with him being so versatile and, sometimes playing the Buffalo nickel if we need him and making run stops. But at the end of the day, he's not very athletic, honestly. But Percy Butler is an athletic freak, one of the biggest athletic freaks, honestly, on this team, especially if you're talking about speed and quickness. And so he's just one of those guys I truly believe in. Bobby McCain just said this week in practice that he never makes the same mistake twice. And remember who that reminds you of. Remember Ron Rivera, when we first drafted Cameron Curl a few years ago out of the 7th round, and not many people knew about him, but Ron Rivera kept talking about him, hyping him up and saying he's a guy that never makes the same mistake twice. And then now we have the Cameron Curl that we know now that's one of our best players in the secondary, one of our best players on the team. And so the fact that I'm hearing the same wording used to describe Percy Butler is very encouraging, man. Never makes the same mistake twice. In that athleticism, far more athletic than a Cameron Curl, that's dangerous. And then again, you have like James Smith-Williams, which is interesting that he had even that high of a coverage grade, because he's our starting defensive end right now, with Casey Suhill really right behind him in grade and in depth chart. And then you have William Bradley King as well. Derek Forrest is going to contribute quite a bit. William Jackson, I'm surprised his coverage grade was this bad. All of these guys, William Jackson, Jamin Davis, Cameron Curl, Kendall Fuller, I'm surprised by all of those. I'm not surprised by David Mayo at all. I'm surprised there was anybody even lower than him. But Devontae Bowsby was cut, so if you were worse in coverage than David Mayo, there's a reason he was cut. Pro Football Focus hit it right on the nose with that one. And then let's take a look at the individual coverages. Danny Johnson overall didn't do well in coverage, and you can see why, because when these receivers were going against them, they all had pretty good grades. So I mean, that just is what it is. And then Devontae Bowsby, the guy that was absolutely terrible in coverage according to Pro Football Focus, and again got cut by us just days later after the preseason game. So it must be a reason. These guys look really good, and I don't even exactly know these guys' names. So for them to be balling like that against Devontae Bowsby, everybody except for Rashawn Henry, who was good against Danny Johnson, but I guess poor against Devontae Bowsby. I don't know what happened there. I would guess I would have to go back and look at the tape to see, but apparently those guys balled out against Devontae Bowsby. And then Percy Butler, I guess why his grade was lower than I expected, because when he was lined up against Giovanni, a tight end / wide receiver, I guess, that got balled out against Percy Butler, but everybody else got shut down. And then you have David Mayo, who just allowed everybody to do their thing except for Chuba Hubbard, who's a running back. But Derek Wright and Keith Kirkwood, we saw that. I remember that vividly, them tearing up David Mayo. Kendall Fuller, I guess he did have that one really bad rep where it went for a touchdown by Sam Darnold. There was pressure in Sam Darnold's face. He threw a great ball over Kendall Fuller's head. And Kendall Fuller, you cannot blame that on scheme there. He was right there. Jack Del Rio had him in the right spot. And I do blame Jack Del Rio for a lot that went wrong, first of all, last year. But even just in this preseason game against the Panthers, especially when the starters were out there, specifically on third downs as well, with all of the soft coverage we were running on third downs. But that touchdown that Kendall Fuller allowed was literally on Kendall Fuller. So again, I blame Jack Del Rio for a lot of problems, but that touchdown against Kendall Fuller was clearly on Kendall Fuller. That was execution. That was not scheme. Again, everybody that apparently lined up against them balled out against them. And y'all got to remember, DJ Moore didn't even play. We had Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold out there, Chuba Hubbard. There was no Christian McCaffrey. There was no DJ Moore. I need that to be remembered. So that does worry me a little bit as far as the defense goes, because they didn't have their best receiver and their best running back, literally their two best weapons. And then you have Steven Parker, who balled out. The only guy that apparently was able to get anything on him was the Keith Kirkwood, who apparently just got something on everybody that covered him at some point. But Steven Parker held it down against everybody else. I mean, completely erased these guys, I guess. And then Jeremy Reeves, The only guy I guess he's credited with really covering was Jared Scott, and apparently that guy did terribly, but Jeremy Reeves, I guess, was almost just as bad. I guess it was more so like a quarterback thing. I don't know. Then Corn Elder, who's pretty much taking the spot of a Torrey McTyer as that next up corner after William Jackson, Benjamin St-Juste, Kendall Fuller, and Danny Johnson. He's the next guy up according to depth chart, and apparently I guess his coverage was good, but the guys that went against him also did really well, but I guess they did really well against other guys. I don't know. Then DeJuan Neal got balled on by Kirk. Again, this Keith Kirkwood guy was going crazy against everybody. Maybe I need to take a look at that guy for real, because it's the reason why DeJuan Neal has such a low grade. William Jackson III really only covered by Robbie Anderson, one of the only real like offensive weapons that's actually going to be out there a lot for the Panthers in the regular season, that actually played in that preseason game against us. And he didn't do well, but William Jackson apparently didn't do well against him either. You have Josh Drayden, really interesting, shut down Charleston Rambo, whoever that is. And then James Smith-Williams, not really noticeable. Cole Holcomb was only credited with covering Giovanni, I guess, but Giovanni did well, but I guess Cole Holcomb did well against just overall coverage. I guess it's more like a zone thing. Derek Forrest let Giovanni go crazy on him, I guess. Cameron Curl let Shy Smith go crazy on him, I guess. Again, I'm gonna have to look at the tape to truly see. And then they also have it broken down in a way that you can see by receiver who was covering them and things like that. So I guess it's like this. You know, it's really interesting data. I'll just scroll by real slowly. If you want to pause it to take a look at any of these, you can. But I mean, we'd be here all day if we really wanted to go look at all of this data. And again, when we get to the regular season, these videos are going to be even longer because a lot of this data is going to be more important. So I'm going to actually spend more time looking at it. Now, moving on to special teams is the final thing that we're looking at. And we'll just look at the highest grades, honestly. I mean, you got Milo Eifler as your highest, then Jeremy Reeves, then Mark and Michelle, Jonathan Williams, Boomy Ratimi, Channing Stribling, Devontae Bowsby, who got cut. This was what he was best at in that game, I guess. Everything else he was, I guess, terrible according to Pro Football Focus, but he was good in special teams. But it wasn't enough to keep his job. Jared Patterson, Kelvin Harmon, and Farrad Gardner make up the top 10. And then just to scroll down a little bit to give you a view of some more people. If you wanted to pause the video and take a look at some of these grades, I'm just trying to provide this for y'all. Just scrolling a little slowly so you can see everybody if you care enough to go this far down. But it's just so many names. It's no use in really diving into all of this all day. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Do you agree with the grades? Do you disagree? And also, again, let me know, like I said in the last video, if you want me to continue this series into the regular season and throughout the preseason. And I'm gonna speak it into existence the postseason as well. Do you actually care about these grades or any advanced stats that I can provide? Please let me know. And also leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Man, I appreciate y'all. And also let me know if you prefer that little, like in the last video that I did, I had me at the bottom left with my cam on. Do you prefer with the cam or off the cam? Because I know with the cam I'm in the way sometimes. So just let me know which one y'all prefer as far as that goes as well. And I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.